borrow Bernadette's line. In 1975, Bernadette, when I entered nursing, I was called a lot of things, but sexy wasn't one of them. Yeah. I stand before you as a nurse, and as a dad, and as a grandpa, and a friend. And as I look out into the audience, my first question to you today is a question that I ask my college students all the time. Are you here? Are you here? Are you here? Yay, because you know and I know as well, like my college kids know, that they can be somewhere else, that they can be thinking about that sick child that they left that morning to come to school, that they can be thinking about the break that we're going to have after I get done talking. Or they could be thinking about that cool Courtney speech right before me that motivated me to take a step to the left. Right? And so I'm asking you in this moment, in this space, to be here. My second question to you this afternoon is equally silly and relevant. Are you breathing? Seriously. Are you breathing? Yes, of course you're breathing. And until I drew attention to it, until I ask you, is it safe to say that your body was breathing you? Yes or yes? Remember, I'm the professor. You agree with me. I've got the stage. Yes, your body was breathing you. And isn't that kind of great? Because the reality is, for the most part, our body breathes us 99.9% of the time, and we don't have to think about it. But if I've hooked up one of my patients and the PICU, the PACU, or the ER to a pulse oximeter to measure their PO2, their percent of oxygen in their blood, and they're struggling to breathe for some type of cardiopulmonary problem, trust me, they're not breathing on autopilot. Their body's not breathing them. And in this moment, you can also breathe your body. You can come off of autopilot breathing, and I encourage you to do that in this moment, to breathe your body. Notice that you can move your chest and that your belly slightly moves, not as much as children as they breathe. Not to breathe any particular way, but to notice, to make that ever so slight step to the left, to inhabit your body, to come here, to come back to this body. And so, this concept of autopilot is relevant. It's not only that our body breathes us, it's that we have those 7 or 9 or 20 habits of successful living. I can be driving from point A to point B, and on one particular day I want to go to point C, but I drive to point B because that's where I normally go. And I get to point B and I think, oh no, I wanted to go to point C. But in that moment, I have that curious awakening, that alertness, that awareness that somebody else was driving that car. And I think, whew, I hope I didn't run any red lights. My seatbelt was on at least. I didn't click it or ticket. Yeah, we have those moments in our lives where we recognize that we come off and on autopilot. But the majority of time, we live in our prefrontal cortex. I want my students there. I want my new nurses in this health system and throughout the world because we are the largest healthcare provider. And I want them to critically think because they're managing these critically ill patients, and I want them to think deeply about those diagnoses and treatments that are being provided, and that they're there 24/7 with them. And so I ask those curious questions to drive them to that part of their brain, that last part of the brain that was to evolve in history, the most fragile. That's why we encourage helmets. And unfortunately, as we age, one of the first parts of our brain to decline. Yeah, I'm concerned about being in that prefrontal cortex. Sometimes I notice I'm in it when I'm in the shower. All of a sudden, I'm in my head because I'm thinking about that student or that administrator or that colleague that I'm going to have that challenging conversation, that critical conversation with. And I'm preparing, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say that. And how dare them say that? And I'm often running in my mind with that conflict and that confrontation, and I step out of the shower, and I'm toweling off, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, I didn't smell the shampoo. Oops. Did I wash my hair? Thank God I have a wife. I noticed when I was at my dentist a couple of weeks ago, she said, Dave, you are eroding your teeth. Your upper left teeth, our gums are being exposed. Slow down, dude. Be a bit more mindful. Yeah, she's already drinking the Kool-Aid along with Oprah Winfrey and all the other gurus in the country that are touting this thing called mindfulness. Yeah. I picked up on Thich Nhat Hanh's work. He was credited with bringing mindfulness to the Western world. And he said that mindfulness is the miracle by which we call back our dispersed mind. Squirrel. Yeah. Call back our dispersed mind. You know, that dispersed mind, that cell phone pulsates and I'm somewhere other than here. Did you see that report that was reported on the news yesterday that said the average American attention span is 7 seconds? Yeah, it's declined from year 2000 when it was 12. And the goldfish attention span is 8. Oops. So we know that this miracle of mindfulness is not just about our dispersion, but read on and to restore the wholeness so that we can live this moment here in community. So but by day, I'm the professor, and I'm working with putting kids in their prefrontal cortex so that they can be prepared to take care of sick and dying and injured individuals. And in the afternoon, I get to listen to story. I sit in a chair. And you know, as I listened to Dr. Mira this morning, I thought, his technology, my technology is caffeine. I sit and I listen. My wife sometimes complains. She says, Dave, my hands are more rough than yours. I said, that's because I get practice sipping coffee. But I listen to stories. I listen to the stories of mass casualty, horrific crime, brutal injury, and yes, lots of addiction. I had a gentleman a few years back, coming back from Afghanistan. His young wife and baby were in a chair next to him. And as he rocked back and forth, his eyes weren't connected to mine, and he certainly wasn't connected to his wife's. Somewhere else. And all he could mutter was that he did something. I did something. I did something. And I recognized that many folks get stuck in a different part of their brain. Yeah, I'm concerned with putting people in the prefrontal, but I noticed with mass casualty and horrific crime that sometimes the crap of life rolls downhill and it lands in people's backyard. And none of us are immune. You know, it happens on a Friday afternoon. TGIF, when you get the diagnosis of your 5-year-old son with terminal cancer. Doesn't that take the wind out of your sails? Doesn't that put you in pause? Or that brutal injury, that life-changing diagnosis, that disturbance of your marriage or your partnership or loss of job or loss of limb. Yeah, it's those big things that put us on pause. But wouldn't it be better if we could put our lives on pause and do it differently? I met Dr. Hans Selye before I knew he was going to be famous in the middle 1970s. He was traveling the world teaching about this stress, the fight, flight, or freeze. He was talking about the cascade of hormones and cortisol and epinephrine that run through the body and wreak havoc on every major system known to mankind, confounded with every illness that we know today. And so, I listened and I listened on, and I noticed that as my career went on, that we were all susceptible to this, and that my nervous system didn't know the difference between what took place 2 minutes ago or 2 weeks or 2 years, that when I was hearing the story, the rocking began. And that where people lived, if I draw the arrows through your eyes and your ears, that intersection of your brain is the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system, the feeling part of the brain. And that is where people get stuck. We call it the monkey mind in therapy, where people get entangled in that web of thinking about their thinking and ruminating and cogitating over the images, the sights, the sounds, the smells of things that have landed in their backyard. In India, they catch monkeys in an interesting way. On the floor of the jungle, they put a tightly woven bamboo box, not exactly like a cage, but a bamboo box that goes over the bananas. I'm told in India that they have monkeys like we have geese here in Fort Wayne. Isn't that a picture? And so they put those bananas on the floor of the jungle, and the monkeys come out because they can see them and they can smell them, and they reach through the bars. And when they reach through, they grab that banana, and when they go to get out, they get stuck. And they try to fight it, and they try to flee it, and they freeze, and they scream, and they cry, and other monkeys hear. And so they come out of the jungle as well, and they say, "Oh, Joe's got a banana, I want one too." No, all the monkey needs to do is drop the banana and it goes free. But it doesn't. It screams and it cries. And suddenly 6, 8, 10 monkeys are jumping up and down on the floor of the jungle. And some Indian person comes out of the jungle and off to monkey land they go. I'm not real sure where that is. But I am pretty sure that each and every one of us hold on to those bananas. Sometimes our bananas are old hurt, old anger, old pain, perfection, the inability to forgive, the inability to connect. And so I ask you today, what are your bananas? What are the things that you would like to let go of? But I also noticed that there were certain life events that could never be let go of. That would be in that limbic system forever. And so I looked for the science. And found it in meditation, mindfulness meditation. And so let me demystify it just a bit, because here in northern Indiana, there were folks that thought that I was sleeping with the devil when I first introduced teaching meditation. Whoa. We pray in this community. You're going to teach us to what? And I was referring to yoga studios because it was the only place I knew that really taught it. That our churches, our cathedrals, our mosques, our temples often were great houses of worship. But did we teach that classroom of silence where we could come back and inhabit and inspire to inspirit our soul? So look at this definition, just ever so briefly, moment to moment. I'm intentional. I'm here today. I have to intend to be here. And I have to intend to stay here longer than 7 seconds. And it's moment to moment, and it's attentional. This is not intuitive, folks. It's not intuitive that where people get stuck in the brain is exactly where I need to take them again. I need to take them right back through that limbic system. I need to take them back to be able to examine, to notice, to smell, to touch, to feel. Because here is sensory. It's multisensory. It's also introception. Introception, isn't that interesting? The feeling of organ within. If I'm working with somebody with an eating disorder, it's kind of important for them to notice if they're hungry. Because if hunger's not the issue, food's not the solution. And it's proprioception. It's moving through time and space and having that sense of balance. And so it's recognizing that through using our senses that I can come to this moment. And unless I'm in the eye of a tsunami, and I'm pretty sure I'm not right now, it's safe. And I can be here. And here I can awareness. I turned that into a verb, didn't I? I can have that awareness. And I can cultivate patience, acceptance, inclusivity, non-attachment. Not exactly the dropping, but the noticing of what I'm attached to, and perhaps changing that expectation. Are you with me? Because it's in changing that expectation that sometimes I can begin to let go. So we practice this. We practice it formally and informally. And we know that the science is good. And it surrounds depression and anxiety and food and pain and addictions. And when I started practicing here at Parkview Health, I would have 4, 5, 10 people, physicians and nurses and housekeepers show up. And then we expanded to the community. And I'll have 40, 45 people show up to do nothing but do a sitting meditation, to breathe our bodies, to come off autopilot, so that in this moment, when I'm not cutting in to an open wound or taking a blood pressure or monitoring a heart rate, that I can just come to this restorative moment called the now. My mother taught me. She said, I grew up in a large Catholic family. We didn't have a lot of money. We grew up on the river, not too far from here, downtown. And she said to me, she said, David, take a slow deep and count to 10. She said, that will prevent you from saying or doing things that you will later regret. You know, that was an important life lesson, but it was only part of the story. The other part of the story is that by being here in this moment, I can join with you. I can celebrate with family. I can notice that 2-second longer embrace as I'm leaving in the morning with that person that's nearest and dearest to me. I can stop and smell my coffee. Peace. Thanks for having me.